Good morning if you're out there at home. It's Barbara and I today. I don't know if maybe Father's Day festivities have kept Joanne in Huntsville, but she was just telling me about Henry's sister Gloria, that she received more or less a final prognosis recently, and you said Henry got to see her, didn't you? Want to see her? That she is just really low right now. So pray for Gloria Rear and all of the family, friends that know her, and praying for her. It's difficult. Pray for Betsy and Ned. Betsy had a procedure last week. Ned wasn't feeling well, but can always pray for the Stevensons. Always pray for Donna. And pray for our expectant mothers, Jessie and Victoria. Victoria and her family and friends had their celebration. Or I used to call it was a baby expectancy of shower or brunch. Continue to pray for Henry Crow as he's probably still working on his blood levels and so forth, and how he is, because of a surgical procedure on his heart many years ago, he is on anticoagulants, so it makes it a little tricky. In order to have this recent hand surgery, he had to retreat from those, and now just the battle is not only for his hand to heal, but to get those blood levels back to proper levels. Continue to pray for the Randalls. I haven't seen Kira since she's been home. I think she's still stateside, but they live in Guam. Anthony did not come home on this trip, but Kira and the baby. So pray for them. Continue to pray for Lucy Ward and for Wes and their family while she is deployed. I imagine that is a dry heat out there, but it sounds like a great potential for being desert conditions. Today is Father's Day. I have a very special greeting to fathers today. We're going to recognize them especially in our worship service. Danny and I got a chance to go. We saw some of our friends at the Gridiron Men's Conference. I didn't get to speak with Phil. It's not a good time. He doesn't get a chance to mingle and circulate. Too many things to be seen to, and they did we got out, I guess, about 10 o'clock Friday night, and then went back yesterday morning. Got out a little before noon, I guess. So it's a good conference, and lots of men there, men and boys, a few ladies, but it was very inspirational, very encouraging, and I believe, in my estimation, there seemed to be more men present than I had ever seen at a Gridirons conference. I've been going for about 10 years. I think there may have been a year when I didn't go, but for 10 years we've been going every year. The men in our church here introduced that to us, and we've been going ever since at their recommendation and because of their participation. During the year, that's when I walk every day, and I park about as, when I go to work, I go to Redstone Arsenal Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I work from home on Thursday and Friday, but I park about as far away as reasonably considered, so that I'll need to walk. But I walked this weekend, and I was sore last night when I went to bed. Plus, Terry's brother, I think, had found a bedroom bed frame and headboard and footboard frame, and that was my task, was when I could this weekend. So I thoroughly tried to completely destroy myself this weekend physically, and I'm tired now, but it's Father's Day, so I've already been blessed this morning. Thinking of my dad. Randy started out by wishing me Happy Father's Day last Sunday, so I got a head start on everybody. Let's pray together. We're going to be looking in at 1Kings again, and we're looking at the administration or the life and the service of King Solomon. Previously, last year we studied recently the Song of Solomon, written by Solomon, and Ecclesiastes, written by him. And we have previously read the Proverbs, and Solomon wrote some of the Proverbs. Very wise man, and yet today we're going to look at some of his most foolhardy decisions that seem to have completely led him astray. But let's pray for our folks, pray for each other, encourage each other. We determined not to have any kind of father's brunch this morning because we didn't know last weekend our air conditioning was not working in the fellowship hall, and even for the baby shower it was very hot. But I was told this week that a colony of ants had discovered something pleasing about the electric field, about those contacts in the air conditioner, and they actually only just had to remove the ants, and it was back on track. I don't know how much you charge for something like that, but I'm sure they came up with a figure. But again, it's very appreciated. So that unit was not actually harmed. It was just needed a little bit of ant removal. So, but we are observing fathers. Gratitude for fathers later on in our worship service. Let's pray together, and then we'll look at 1Kings chapter 11. Lord, thank you for those who are watching and tuned in this morning from their homes, looking on phones or tablets or on their television or some tablet or pad or computer. We thank you for the technology that you've allowed through human ingenuity that we might pick up something like this, and it would help us contact people that otherwise we might not have contact with. I've had contact with old friends, it seems more lately than usual. It's been good just to see their names, people joining in, people sharing their own testimony. Thank you for the possibility of doing that. Thank you for the members of our church, those who are studying your word today. Bless through some knowledge that matters, knowing something that makes a difference, not just becoming more religiously literate, not just being able to answer religious questions, but being equipped, being trained, being resolute in our faith, being confirmed in what we believe. Help us with our doubts and fears, so many questions that we have no answers to. Teach us, however, to trust in you and to learn as much as we can. Thank you for this time, and we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Anytime I'm kind of talking about what's going on and what people are facing and difficulties, pray. I always have a nagging concern in the back of my mind that I'm forgetting someone or I've overlooked someone, failed to mention someone. And so don't let me do that. Help me. I do have lapses in memory sometimes, gaps that are not there. But see, today is the 19th. That means that Thursday is your birthday. Is that right? 23rd?
23rd.
All right. Barbara has a birthday coming up. And I hope you have a good birthday. Liz's birthday was on the 2nd of June, but our family's kind of going through some difficult times. The sisters, health issues. And they really love Liz and appreciate her. She is a good person to know. She's very kind to all of us. She's a good person, and just does so many things for all of us in our family. But they were not able to celebrate her birthday on the 2nd of June, so they got together yesterday, and even then, I think one of her sisters was in the hospital yesterday, or at least was Thursday, Friday, and one of them tested positive for COVID and didn't get to come. So still difficult. Still difficult. Pray for Paulette Young. I've mentioned her, and she and Donnie lost a son. He was injured in an accident in December, and they buried him just about a month and a half ago. Pray for Donnie and Paulette Young. They live near Ardmore, Alabama. I was invited tonight. When we were at Donnie's funeral, we saw Jimmy and Loretta Underwood. One of the things that we were able to do while I was pastor there at Woolly Springs is that we got to where hiring someone to be a church secretary would be helpful, and so Loretta Underwood took that job. I left there in 1994, and Loretta had already been secretary there a few years, but she's retiring. I think she turns 65 in October, but they're having a reception for her tonight at Woolly Springs. She invited us, and we had to beg off because of family Father's Day obligations. But Loretta will be retiring after many years of being a faithful secretary. They'll have to figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to get things done. She knows all the things that need to be done there. Let's just read a little bit of the scripture. Sometimes I like introduction, foundation, what's behind the scenes. In 1Kings 11:1, it says, but, we kind of, the first 10 chapters about how David passed away. Solomon was anointed and crowned king, and when he began his little bit of intrigue and rivalry to begin his reign, his mother was probably the mind behind the throne, Bathsheba. But the better part of these first 10 chapters tell about Solomon having the temple constructed, the great temple. When Moses led the Israelites out of their Egyptian bondage into the wilderness on the way to the promised land, the land that had been promised to Abraham, their forefather, the book of Exodus, a great portion of the book of Exodus is like instructions on how to build a meeting structure, a holy place. It was called the tabernacle. It was a tent that made of animal skins, and it had like 2 compartments. One was the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, the golden covered box that carried the 10 Commandments and other things, was in the Holy of Holies. And then a little bit larger was that front compartment. It was called the Holy Place. That was the tent. That was actually the tabernacle. And in front of the tabernacle was a huge water basin. It was called the laver, a place where water washings and cleansings took place. I've seen it depicted in a lot of different ways, like with water spigots. And then one was very ingenious. It was nobody knows what it looks like, where it was on a swivel where they could tip it, and one person stand over here, another person tip it, and it would pour water over their hands. It was they did sacrifices there in that location, that area, and so it was very messy. But this was a religious ritual as well as for cleanliness. Right in front of the entrance you kind of have the tabernacle, the laver, the water basin, and a huge altar made of brass. And there was always smoke coming from that, burning all the different animal sacrifices. There was a fence made of fabric. They had posts that could be planted into the sand, posts planted around, and it made a kind of a rectangular fence, and fabric was run around it, and that's the tabernacle. Well, it is that design, and they carried it with them. They would roll it up, pack it up, store it, and then it had everything had handles on it with poles and things like that. So they were moving. They were always on the go, and they would be in one camp, and then they would camp in another. And they continued that. They were going to the land of Canaan, and yet it was God's intention for them to kind of go through a training process, an educational process, an experience. And so it would have only taken a few weeks actually to go from Egypt to Palestine to Israel, or where Israel is today. But God arranged it so it took them 40 years. Well, they took a vote and they voted not to go in, and so God's punishment for them was that they were going to have to experience another 40 years out there in the desert. So wherever they moved, it was described as wandering, wandering in the wilderness. And so wherever they went, they would pack up this place of worship. It's where they did their sacrifices. The priests had certain duties. When you went into the holy place, over on the right was a table called showbread. It was the bread, actually the word show or demonstrate or indicate, or look at this, the bread of testimony. And it always had 12 loaves of bread on it. Table of showbread. And then over here on the left there was a lamp. It had 7 bowls, kind of like a candelabra, and it always had a flame, oil for burning a light of the lampstand. And then right in front of all of that was of the altar of incense, and there was always incense. That's one thing the priest did: kept oil here, kept the bread fresh there, and kept the incense burning 24 hours a day on the altar of incense. And there was a curtain at the end there, and you go in, and there would be the tabernacle. It was probably about this big on this side of the table, covered with gold, and it was a box. And it had a lid on it made of solid gold, and there were angel figures of what they had been told that angels looked like on the lid, and the angels had wings, and the wings came out from behind them toward the center of the box. So very good to, I don't know if you're a movie fan or not, but if you ever watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, Harrison Ford movie from a long time ago, but still very good entertainment, I guess. They had an artist's depiction. They actually made what the ark looked exactly like. But that was in the Holy of Holies, and the high priest would go in there one time a year on the Day of Atonement, and he would sprinkle blood on that lid, that mercy seat. It was a part of there. It was all laid out, all described, and that's a big part of what the law is. The law is not just one of the 10 Commandments, is just a very small part of it there in Exodus 20. It says what this was to be made out of, how long it was going to be, how tall, how wide. The priests, their hats looked like this. They had to wear this kind of garment, and this is their duties. And so that's specifically what the book of Leviticus. We have Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, and Leviticus. So all of that is very detailed about how it's to be made, and the dimensions. It's like a blueprint. It's like building instructions. And so when Solomon was going to build the temple, that's what they used, and that's what the temple looked like. It had a wall around it. It was a real wall, and they had a big building that was divided into 2 parts. So it was the tabernacle, and it was permanently built on a mountain there at Jerusalem. Well, we come now to, well, actually, they dedicated the temple, and Solomon made lofty promises. God promised blessings, and it was a celebration. It was a time of worship and adoration. Then we get to the but here in 11:1. But King Solomon loved many, and the King James Version says strange women, and it actually means foreign. Many foreign women. It really means women who were not Israelites. They were not Jewish people. Together with the daughter of Pharaoh. We'd already mentioned that he had a wife. He married the daughter of Pharaoh. Women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. You know, we come along and I think I taped it. I'm going to watch it, but there was something on one of William Shatner's shows, the Unexplained, about whether or not King Arthur ever really existed in England. And so he said, we're going to find that out. Well, I haven't watched it yet. But so many people just look at, they have an impossibility of viewing the Bible as having any historical value or merit at all. Specifically, when I see the Hittites, some people say, well, these other people there are some records, but the Hittites never actually existed. They're like an imaginary people. They were fictional. There was no such thing as Hittite till they found the Hittite cities, and the place where the Hittites' territory was, and their capital cities, and began to unearth all kinds of relics and tablets, and things that. All different kinds of archaeological evidence of the Hittites, because I would say, oh, well, we were just kidding. Well, so many things like that. I don't know if they give up after a while, but they never will. Of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, you shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. He said he was smitten. Well, the thing about these kinds of commands in the Bible, we even see a command in the New Testament. Paul says, be ye not unequally yoked together in marriage. He says, don't. And it never has been, it's been interpreted in human history as don't marry white people, or don't marry black people, don't marry Chinese people, or you should not marry people of a different social standard or caste. It is cast as racism or as a negative kind of culturalism or nationalism. It is often viewed as, to say, well, and, here in our history in the South, they were talking about mixed marriages. The only kind of mixed marriage that God ever told his people or warned them against and commanded them not to participate in was a matter of their religious beliefs. Here, that's exactly what he's saying. He's not saying that they are inferior people, or they have a different color skin, or you're mixing cultures. It never was that. He was saying it's very obvious. And Paul says it this way. He says, Paul even has talked about, in his mind, even marrying what would be, quote, a good Jewish girl or a good Christian girl. Paul said, he said, I could marry a woman if I wanted to, but he says it would just be a distraction for me. He says it's a personal decision. He says if I married a woman, he says I would love her more than I love God. He says it's just a natural thing. We see it when God created Eve in the Garden of Eden. You would just start out by saying in the creation story, it says God created Adam. And then God says in Genesis, it's not good for man to be alone. Well, that was during a time it's shared with us there that God talked to Adam He walked with him in the cool of the day. God and Adam had a relationship. And yet it was God's impression that Adam was alone. And that's a hard thing. And God's not a human being, so I don't think he was angry or jealous or resentful. Things had to change, and God did things in his relationship with humanity that made it possible for his creatures to commune with him. And it had to be on a spiritual basis. It couldn't be sitting down having a meal or shaking hands or embracing. It couldn't be physical. Adam in that regard was alone. God says, even though I'm standing right here with him, he's alone. So he created Eve. And right away, Adam was taken with Eve. She was a good idea. And but we see that Adam was no longer alone. And when it came to the point, Eve decided to eat the forbidden fruit, and it says she gave to her husband, and he did eat. And I don't think he ate it because he wanted an apple. I don't think he was really, it doesn't say anything about him going through a temptation struggle. Sometimes men are not bright enough to be tempted, but are sharp enough, and the devil doesn't even try that tactic. But when it came to a place where I believe Adam obviously understood the commandment to not to eat the fruit, he had to choose between, should I obey God or it wasn't a matter of obeying his wife, but she was saying, here, eat this. Here's supper tonight. And it says he ate. Over the years, as I'm asked, I've been asked and invited and been privileged to marry a lot of people. I said, I'll try to be honest. I don't want to be offensive. And when they come to me, they'll ask questions and they want to talk. I used to do a lot of marriage counseling, and I've stopped doing that many years ago. I don't feel like I have marriage expertise or wisdom. But I said, he doesn't go to church, and he doesn't seem to have any regard for God, and you go to church every Sunday. Isn't that going to be a problem? You don't believe the same things about God. And I know that I've seen women and I've seen men who feel that they're going to be influential. They're going to persuade their spouse that he loves me, she loves me, and so eventually, as much as I love God, they will love God too. But the thing is that you would think that it would work that way often. And I have seen instances where a spouse has been brought to faith because of their relationship and the marriage bond. But here is most often what happens. Solomon loved, it says, let's see, verse 3, he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. And that's the thing. He didn't say that, they were of a bad race, or their skin color was wrong, their hair was different, they were of a different nationality, or they had different genetic makeup, or they were an inferior race. No, it just simply said they worship different gods. More so then than now. Every nation had a god. It was their national god. The Hebrew people, their god was Jehovah. Their god was Elohim, Yahweh. And wherever a person, even I remember when I was a little boy that nearly everybody in the United States of America was religious to some extent, and now it seems very few people are religious. I meet very few people who are religious. But America has been thought of as a Christian nation. It's not a Christian nation. It never was a really a Christian nation. We never did make citizenship and Christianity one and the same, though a lot of people do. A lot of people think if you're of a particular religious organization, that will make you more prone to be of a particular political party, and that's not. And I see a lot of Christians who have great confidence and hope in. We're right now, we're still electing people. We're still having elections, and a lot of the people who are advertising, they'll say, "Well, I'm a Christian. I'm a conservative Christian," and they'll say, "I'm a born again Christian." I was like, I'm a better Christian than you are," and that person, and then they all tell each other that they accuse each other of being liars and thieves and immoral. Like, my goodness, maybe that's true. But if you've campaigned on being a Christian, why should you be calling someone bad names? Someone should. That doesn't seem like Christian behavior. Anyway, Paul's argument is, if you have two people and one of them, they believe in different gods or they have different religious beliefs, even if it's supposedly the same God. When I was pastor at the Fosterville Baptist Church, my first church I pastored, our minister of music never missed a service. He was there. Powell Brothers, he was there. He led our music. And he was a deacon in our church. But his wife was a very staunch and faithful member of the Church of Christ. So she would go to the Church of Christ in our neighborhood, and she never missed a service either. And they spent their whole married life, they never went to church together, never worshiped God together, and they just didn't agree religiously. And it seems that's I don't know if it caused any grief or problem. It just looks like odd. There was one family, the Edwards, and they had 4 or 5 children, and the mother, evidently, the father was a member of the Church of Christ, and Nancy came to our church, and she brought all the kids. I'm the mom, so evidently she kind of put her foot down. But every time one of those, while I was there as pastor, several of the kids kind of got old enough where evidently they had an agreement, they can decide wherever they want to go to church. Well, one by one, those kids began going to the Church of Christ, going to church with Daddy. Okay. Wade Edwards, little tiny fella. One Sunday morning, I heard a knock at my door. Sunday morning, before church started, went there, opened the door, and there's Wade. He said, "Preacher, my daddy wanted me to come ask you, is the Baptist church ever mentioned in the Bible?" And I said, "No, Wade, it is not." He said, "That's what he said." And he just turned around and then walked off. Okay. Strange thing to do to a little boy, but his dad working on him. And it didn't matter to me whether he went to a Church of Christ or to the Baptist. But for them, and maybe not every one of that persuasion, but most of the people that I've been close to in my life who've attended the Church of Christ pretty much believe that Baptists are all going to hell. So it's not just a matter of you believe your way and I believe my way. It's my way is the only way, and we're the only ones going to heaven. So that's very severe. In this, there is a lot, and this is just kind of like a side topic. There's a great deal of polygamy in the Bible. I can't remember or think of a single instance where a woman had more than one husband. Evidently, women are smarter. But there's a lot of polygamy. A lot of men. Abraham had several wives. He started out with 2, Sarah and Hagar. But then later on, he took his wives' handmaids to be his wives, or concubines. Concubines is just a mistress, and generally, I don't think they have it anymore. But an offshoot of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had a television program on cable called Sister Wives. Have you ever heard of that? Sister Wives. Because it seemed to me, this program was about the process that a Mormon family goes through to bring other women into the marriage and into the family. Oh, boy. So in order to, it was kind of expressed that it wasn't an absolute requirement, but it seemed to be that there was great effort being made for the first wife to approve of any other wives who came in, and they kind of became sister wives, sisters. Oh, this is just so weird. And some questions were answered, some I didn't even want to ask. But the Bible never approves of polygamy. The Bible doesn't teach polygamy. Now, a lot of David had wives. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. In Deuteronomy 17:17, it says, "Do not multiply your wives." In Genesis, it says, when God created Adam and Eve, God made a point of recording at that point in Scripture that this is what God wants you to do. A man and a woman and their marriage. A male and a female. And he indicated too, and I lived through the 60s where sexual relationships were pursued simply as recreation. And it seemed to be archaic, and people began during that period of our history to completely reject any idea or notion that the purpose of marriage is for a man and woman to come together for procreation, so children can be born. The purpose, the first purpose, of course, it is something that God evidently has made enjoyable and made pleasant. It's a part of the expression of love, intimacy, physical intimacy, and yet its base purpose is the propagation of humanity for the birth of children. Not everybody who is married has children or can have children. Someone who is living in a marriage where there are no children doesn't mean that their marriage is not complete or that there is something missing. It's for their own determination. They may feel something is missing. I know Danny and Liz have never had children, and yet they're very good parenting people. They've helped me raise my children and grandchildren, and they're deeply loved. And I sense often the sadness in their heart when there's a Father's Day or Mother's Day. That we always get. My kids always thank Danny, my brother, for being their other father. And we do the same thing for Liz. She's mothered us all. But you can't find in the Bible an instance where a man had multiple wives, where it turned out well, or where it worked, where it was successful. It always seems to be heartbreak and tragedy. God had promised Abraham that he and Sarah would have a child. It would be the beginning of a nation. But when they became old and it didn't appear that they were going to be able to bear children, Sarah gave her servant. And again, the Bible doesn't condone slavery either. But the Bible says this is the way it was. For Sarah to have a slave or a servant didn't go well because it wasn't a command of God. It wasn't something, it was just something God allowed or permitted. It was an act of disobedience. It was a sin. And then to give her servant to her husband to bear children. And so out of Hagar and Abraham came Ishmael, and it was the Arab nation, the Arab people. All of the Arab people today, and all those people of Arab nations, Abraham is their father. They're related. You know, we see that even in the New Testament. Jewish people says, we are the children of Abraham. Well, so are the Arab people. And it has created a whole two nations that seem to hate each other. So today, I know that it is not politically correct to say there is a blueprint, there is a design. Just as there was a blueprint for the building from the tabernacle to the temple, God has a blueprint, a design for marriage, for about what a man is, what a woman is, what a marriage is, the purpose of marriage. Those are looked at as being hateful these days, rejecting others. Paul even describes what is natural for a man, what is natural for a woman, and all that. Those words seem to be very offensive to many today. And yet, I don't speak in terms of what's normal, or even what's in terms of what's traditional. What's traditional seems to be what we like to do or what we prefer. It's more than tradition. When God made things, they had a purpose and He had a plan. And to want to adhere to those is not a rejection of people, but it is a rejection of many different kinds of ideologies. And it's not because God is narrow or because He is cruel or has no regard for human feelings. But we can look here in the Bible and say, God would say that never works out. Eating the forbidden fruit is never a good idea. It always brings its consequences and its problems. God says, if you touch the hot stove, you're going to get burned. If you walk down the wrong path, you're going to wind up in the wrong place. And so God's ideals and God's leadership are not by way of condemning people, but it's like a road sign that says this way to Disneyland. Heard a joke many years ago. We used to tell little moron jokes. We could say ugly and offensive things then, and of course nobody we knew was a moron. To be moronic is actually a medical diagnosis. We talk about the little moron said he was going to Opryland, and he was going up I-65, and he saw a sign that says Opryland left, and so he turned around and went back home. He didn't know where it had gone, but for some reason it had left. Well, God says, this is the way out of the burning house. This is the way through the woods. This is the way to heaven. This is the way to hell. And He says, I don't want you to go. I don't want you to. And so there are rules and regulations. There is something in us that makes us say, well, you're stealing our liberty. You're doing away with our freedom. The guidelines you're saying are unfair and unjust. Well, God is just saying, look, I'm just telling you that if you have 700 wives, you're going to have some trouble. It's not going to be happy. And even if you let them build their temples to their gods all over the land of Israel, it's not only, it might make your wives happy for that time when you have that dedication, but He says the people of Israel are going to go to those temples too, and they're going to sacrifice. It mentions here in 1Kings chapter 11 that He even built high places to Moloch. And they were the people who sacrificed babies. They put little babies in the fire as their sacrifices to Moloch. It doesn't say that Solomon ever did that or allowed that to happen to any of his children, but it was something that his decisions left an opening for, and it was practiced. And God says, see what happens if it causes the lives of little babies to be lost. He says, you can't look at that and say, well, that's a good thing, because they were saying, well, this will bring crops, this will bring the rain, it'll usher in prosperity, it'll pave the way for a golden future. All we have to do is sacrifice our little babies. And God says, no, that's not right, that's not good. I guess we will bear some criticism or some negative opinion if someone says, well, you're just an ugly, hateful, narrow-minded Christian. You just hate other people. No. I found that there were times when I was very angry at my father, and but every time my father told me to do this or to not do that, he was trying to help me, and he was trying to protect me and instruct me, and sometimes correct me, and he intended well. And I'm still angry with him, but I wish he were here now, and I would ask him advice about almost anything that I do. All right, let's go on, Barbara, and God bless you all who've joined us today. And I hope you'll continue to study with us. Thank you.